Want some tips and tricks for building the T-6A Texan 2 by Seagull models from Gator-Rc? Stick around, we're gonna get to building. All right, guys, here we go. It is time to dig into the build series of the T-6A Texan 2. I hope you follow along with me through the whole series. I hope you really like this. We are going to get started. Couple pointers here. Number one, we have the beginning of what we need laid out. Go through your owner's manual, make sure that you understand some of the beginning steps, what they want you to do. There's some areas in there that I'm already looking to change or alter, or things that I had to look at to get clarification. So understanding and reading the book before you get started is always helpful. We have these foam pads, again, to protect our surface while we're working, so we don't put cuts, scratches, or dings in the covering, the aura cover on this. Again, genuine aura cover. Remember, just something as small as that little dust particle right there, when you're pushing on a piece of covering on there, it really ruins it and indents it and gives you an undesirable result. So as we get started, we have our tool set here, again from RJX Hobbies. Love that thing. That's set up and ready to go. Our foam pads. We have some instant thin CA, so that actually has a nice clean tip or nozzle to it. So that way we can put glue in very finite areas and we're not making a mess all over the place. I have some clear containers, which I'm going to dump my assortment of hardware in. I use a little pair of tweezers, makes getting everything out of there easier. Some brand new X-Acto knives with blades. And then we have the small foot covering iron, and then our big one with the sock, because as we go through with this, I'm going to show you what we do to some of this covering and stuff, so that way we get it prepped. But let's get digging into this thing and get started. So one of the first things in the manual that we are going to do is remove these pieces of tape, and we are going to start hinging the surfaces for the flaps. So as we do that, we're going to take our iron, and on each one of these wing panels, we are going to go ahead and iron this covering down. It's going to prevent wrinkles. So anywhere where it's solid, I am going to go back over with the iron, especially around some of the corners or edging where something may want to pop up or be loose. We're going to make sure that before I start gluing, that every piece of covering all the way around this plane that it has a hard surface underneath or an edge or a seam is gone over with the iron, because it's a lot easier to do it now than to have an issue where you get fuel or something underneath it later and have it start peeling off, because then the wood is soaked with some oil if you go with a nitro or a gas option. But otherwise, if we can get all this stuff really pressed down onto the wood, it'll keep it from bubbling out in the heat or the sun of the day. And then we're going to get into hinging these. So let's get started. We are going to use our Bigfoot iron, and we are going to get into this project at the beginning of our manual. Let's go. All right, guys, so we're getting started here now that we got the covering done on one of the wings. We're getting ready to hinge this flap surface on here, and then just something small I ran into as I undid my hinges. There's no hardware in here for it. I've gone through and assorted. They call for a 2mm by 10. Again, when you're looking at screw size, 2mm is the width, if you will. 10mm starts at the beginning of the head to the tip, and there's no screws to accommodate the massive number that you need here for these hinges. I'm assuming they were supposed to be in with all of these, and they're not. So I do have the right length and screws. I am just going to use that. So one of the things that you want to do here when we go to hinge is they already have your starting screw holes there for spacing. You're going to go in the white. That hole is opened up for the actual horn, which is just going to be a threaded rod horn that sticks out of there, which I actually do like the posts. But they do not have the holes drilled here, so you will need a small drill bit to do that. And one of the things we're going to do is try and evenly space the gap in this flap all the way around. And we'll start off by doing one hinge And we need to actually work these screws all the way down through there. So I use a very small pilot bit, and we're just going to simply go down through and open that hole up, so it makes it a lot easier. And this is just a very small, slow speed drill. It's perfect for this, and this is going into a hardened block. So that way we drill our pilot. So that's there. And then you take your screws and you start them in the hole and you work them all the way down. And that cuts those threads. Once the threads are cut, all right, you're going to go ahead and make sure you have a rag available to soak up any of this stuff, and you only need a little bit. We're going to take some of this thin CA and just put a couple drops in there. And the reason I keep a rag handy is just in case you bubble it, don't smear it and wipe it, dab it. The rag will suck up the CA instantly. If you have debonder and stuff like that, it causes a chemical reaction, sometimes yellows the stuff, so a rag usually works best just to soak that stuff up. Once that stuff is cleaned up, it's hardened the hole for these screws. If you don't do this, they're just going to pull right out. We're going to re-drill it like that. And if you notice these hinges, you want to make sure you use your silicone fuel tubing to hold them together. So we are going to then put that screw in, and they only do one hole out of the 3, and we will make this hinge parallel to that line, and then we will drill it. So till this is all said and done, we have 2 full wings of this to do, which is going to take us a little bit of time. So you can see right there, that one is in nice and solid. And now that it's there and holding itself in place, I can make sure that that is parallel by looks. I am going to repeat this process 3 times on this wing with a total of 6 screws on each hinge. So let's get to that. Assembly tip: make sure that when you put your hinges on, that you have the right pieces in place. You need to make sure that that hinge line is right here on the hinge of the flap. If you put these on opposite, the hinge line will be way down here, which will be incorrect. And I'm just using these as spacers all the way around because they are a good fit. So again, make sure that your hinge line is on the hinge. The next thing we're going to do, we have our hinges installed for our flap. When it comes down to the directions for the flaps, they don't really tell you anything about the horn or what length it should be or installing it or anything else. So if you flip far enough in the head into the manual, you can find the M3x40s and the M3x35 studs. So what I've done is I've eliminated the 35s because I know those are for the elevator. We'll see what else we have left. And it turns out we have 4 of these left that are for the wings. And these are 3x40s, so it doesn't matter. So what we're going to do is you're going to take this thing with the countersunk washer here, all right? We're going to take this thing and slide it up through the bottom. We are going to apply some epoxy in the inside around that shaft to fill in the spacing in there. And on the top, we are going to match it with another aluminum washer. And then they want you to use these just regular 3 metric nuts, M3 metric nuts. I'm going to use an anodized black locking nut for a little bit extra measure, so I know that that will never come loose in there, and I think it gives it a nice little touch anyway. So let's go ahead and get that done, and then we'll do the hinging of the ailerons. We're going to go ahead and get the hinges installed in here. So we've already sealed that with the iron. Now these are just fiberglass hinges, so halfway through, what you want to do is insert a T-pin into there. You can do 1 or 2, it doesn't matter. And that lets you know as a marker that you're halfway. Now there's another trick you can use is a crayon. You can actually rub a crayon into the center, and that will actually keep the center of the joint flexible. You can use a marker and not a T-pin. I personally like T-pins. So those are set in there and ready to go. And then also for our horns, I just trial fit one of the horns on the inside. What I did here with the covering is just kind of poked it, and I try and seal the covering along the edges because we'll be filling that hole full of epoxy. That way it's sealed and it doesn't give you that wood look or a possibility for something to come soak in here. So by the time we put a little epoxy in there and in that hole, that will actually become fuel proof as well. So now what we want to do is that's about a 1/16 of a gap. We're going to go ahead and dry fit all of our hinges here. It is best to make sure that you do not mix up your ailerons. Do not take both of them off at the same time unless you are going to mark them. And this aileron's a little bit harder to see where our line was. That's why I opted. It's easy in the wing. Let's see if we can find that. And you don't want to really, with fiberglass hinges, you want to make sure you really don't open up those slots too big, because then what happens is the hinge doesn't soak right into the wood. All right, so we got those 3 in there. And now we are going to insert it into the wing. And again, you can use nylon hinges here if you prefer. You can actually go and re-drill and use Robarts. When you do an ARF, there's nothing that says you have to use exactly what they give you, as long as you're using equivalent or better hardware. I would never degrade it. And then work those in so you're really not twisting them at all. Try and keep them straight. And then you'll notice here, see how this gap is off right there and here. So you want to make sure that you have everything lined up the way it's supposed to be, because these end caps, this light end cap is going to come over here against the side. So we want to make sure that that distance is going to be good there and there. So we're going to go ahead and push that nice and tight in there up against those T-pins. Make sure again before we start gluing things that we would be happy with our gap, that it looks symmetrical, because you don't want the aileron rubbing either. So we're just going to come in just a hair more. That looks good there. And then you want to just take, again, your thin CA. You're going to fold that surface all the way down. And you're just going to give it a couple drops down in there. And then you really want to make sure that you're pushed in, again, nice and tight. And have your rag handy, so in case you got any CA on the covering, that you could wick it away right away. But keep that pressure there and just keep giving it a wiggle. Now a lot of people will go ahead and grab the T-pins at this point. Don't grab them with your fingers because the glue on them is probably still wet. Pull them out with a pair of pliers. Make sure that we got no CA coming over here on the other side. And then we're going to fold it over. We're going to do the same thing here. And just give it a couple wicks. And then make sure nothing ran through on the other side. Again, try not to drag, blot. Gonna flip there. All right. So there's that thing. And now what we're going to do is, again, mix up some epoxy. We're going to put that in the inside of there. We are going to flip, so this one will actually go through here like this. That will be our top view, and that will go down through the inside of there. So let's mix up some epoxy and get that in. Now here's something to keep in mind, guys. Number one, these mechanical retracts, I'm very, very impressed with the beefiness and quality of these mechanical retracts. Now it does take a little bit of trimming to get that to fit in there, but these things are super stout, and realistically the servo to actuate them is literally right in the inside right there. So this isn't going to be an issue in order to put the mechanicals in, and I believe to get them to work really well. And notice how the center line of that axle falls right in the center line of that hole. So when that wheel sits in there, that wheel will sit nicely in the pocket. I picked up some optional electronic retracts. Wiggle this thing out of here. And although these fit in here really, really nicely, and they look nice, here's the problem. If you go off of center line of that axle, you're literally going to be hitting the support housing of this retract. So I honestly don't think that's going to be possible to put these in there unless you extend the wheels further to the edge of the pocket and cut that opening up, which I don't want to do, and or go with smaller mains, which I don't want to do either, because I want this thing to be very grass capable. So for now, we are going to stay with the decision to use the mechanical retracts that I was very impressed came in this kit from Seagull Models in Gator-Rc. So let's go ahead and take a look here. You can see I sealed off all the pockets inside. I rolled that covering over to seal and fuel-proof those edges, and I am going to do the same in the pocket here for the servo, and then we are going to join all the pieces together. The next step in our process is we're going to go ahead and join the wing together. We have all of our pockets again done. Everything is hinged up and ready to go to be joined. Now they do tell you that you should cut that covering off there, but there's more than enough wood surface, and the strength of this wing is really in the wing tube, down that main spar, if you will, that main portion. And then we also have this wooden dowel down here, so we have plenty of space to go ahead and apply epoxy. We're going to use the Seagull Loctite 9462. This is a slow cure. This will only start to harden in an hour, so it'll really soak into the wood here really well and really give us a nice tight bond. And I am going to use a strap just to keep the pressure of the wings together. Those pieces of what we thought were extra covering were really tape to use here at the seam, and then they also have iron-on pieces for down at the wingtip. But as you cut those pieces out, it's always just a good idea to save them in case you need patchwork later. It's free pieces of covering along the way. So we're going to go ahead and put a nice coating of slow epoxy all over this thing, and we're literally just going to let it set overnight. We're not in a hurry. You can see a little chip out of the wood right there. We're not in a hurry to do this. We want to make sure we don't put so much on there that it's oozing and gooing out. So a little bit of the slow cure epoxy, especially in here around the dowels. Make sure it's nice and clean. We're going to strap it and make sure we don't deform the wing. And we got some foam here for the edges just to keep it protected. So let's get to joining this thing. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for tonight. Basically, we're not putting a lot of tension on this wing, so we're not bowing the wing. We're not doing anything more than just keeping a little pressure on that joint. They want you to use tape. I'm not big on just holding things together with a piece of tape until that dries, especially with slow cure epoxy. It really needs time if you want it to be a great bond. So important places, really important places, get very important epoxy. That's why we're using the high sol. That's why we're using the 1 hour mix right there. And you could see any little glue that come out of the seam there. We've cleaned that up with just some rubbing alcohol. So we're going to let this sit overnight. Tomorrow we're going to come back. I don't have servos yet. That's why I didn't do those. But all the flaps, the hinges, the control horns, all that stuff is done. The wheel wells are done. We know we're going with the mechanical retract. So we're getting close. This build isn't overly complicated. It's just got a couple small nuances that I've seen already. But really looking forward to getting this wing done and the retracts done, and really excited to get the motor installed in that fuselage. So let's let this set up overnight, and we'll see you guys tomorrow night. Welcome back, everybody. The next step in the book, we are going to go through a couple different steps here. We are going to get the mechanical retracts opening grooved out a little bit more. They catch on those bolts just a little bit, which is no big deal, so that's going to take a little bit of minor trimming to get those to fit appropriately in there. We are going to find where those go in the back for our bolt holes and get those epoxied into place so they are bolt supports for the wing, so that way they don't pull through. We are going to trim and install our pockets for the retracts and get those put into place. And we are also going to finish up on our other control surfaces, the hinging, just the same way we did the ailerons here, and we're going to get our control horns also installed. Now, one of the things that I did want to point out here is that there are no directions for these, which isn't a big deal. I know where those go. We have a couple small tidbits here also, which get located in the wing right about there, so we have to find where those holes are and get those opened up and ready for those. And then the last thing is all this covering and tape that they give you. There actually are some small strips of covering, and most of it winds up being vinyl decal. They want you to use the vinyl decal, and they do not tell you what colors, but I would assume that you're going to have gray that kind of overlaps this white a little bit. Because we did this the way we did it with the strap, notice that there is really no gap or seam here that I need to worry about. And being that this is an electric model, I really feel that this turned out super clean in our seams, to the point where we're not going to have oil residue or anything else that's going to ever leak down into there. That epoxy is so good from high sol in there that stuff sealed all that up anyway. I'm not worried about it. But if I had a gas or a nitro model, I would consider using the correct color tape, which would, like, up here probably just be the white, and overlay that to seal up those seams. But man, guys, those turned out so good. I am not worried about putting on more decals or strips of stickers or anything else that I worry about. Now, with the winglets, as soon as we get our navigation light put in here, you do have these little pods that are going to get epoxied onto the end of the wing. So when these things go on, that'll be a different story. There'll probably be something here that I'm going to cover that up with for looks, most likely. And then I'm even debating, do I want to epoxy these on, or do I just want to go through and actually notch these almost like a picture frame so you can slide them and lock them into place. But I don't think you'll ever need to take them out. Those LEDs shouldn't really ever give you a problem. But that's the next step, and we're going to hit the time lapse. Let's get to bulking out this wing, finishing it up. Builder tip. So they give you two of these wheel pockets that are exactly the same. And after you trim them and you're getting ready to lay them in there, you get one of them and you go, okay, trim that up, that's perfect. Make sure you don't trim this here all the way open. Leave that like that as you install it there. So the retract is going to come in through this space, and we may have to cut that down a little bit, but you want that shoulder in there aesthetically to line up. So you take your other one and you go to put it in this side, and now nothing lines up. And you're like, oh man, they sent me the wrong one, or I have it on the wrong side. So if you flip them, here's my cut one, and it doesn't fit right either. So here's the thing. This piece of the wing here is not structural, it's just sheeting and there for aesthetics. So all we need to do is we are going to trim out that leg right there. And that will allow this wheel pant to fit in properly this way, and you will never see or notice the difference. So we're going to get the trimming. All right, guys, you can see how we put in that kind of reversed facet in there and trimmed away the top. And now our wheel pocket fits in there and everything lines up like it should. So a couple more tips. We went ahead and put our retracts in there, drilled the holes, ran the screws through, and then soaked everything in CA, removed it, soaked everything in CA around here. So that way it firms up all of that bracketry and the supports in the inside. Re-drill it, re-tap it with your screws, and now we're ready to go ahead and drop those in there. And we're actually going to be using my own hardware here instead of what they supply. We're going to use these nice tapered washers and hex drive screws to really give it some support and strength. And we're going to go ahead and get those things fitted up here. The other thing that we do, if you can see that, we grind the flat spot here for those wheel collars really to sit on and really tighten up. And then you put your wheel on there. Your grub screw of the wheel collar is going to now sit on that flat spot. But one of the things that I do right before I slide this on is I apply some hot glue right on this shaft and slide it over to hot glue. So that way the hot glue helps to kind of retain everything and keep it from wanting to vibrate loose. So that's what we're going to work on next. So there you have it, guys. That completes about 90% of our wing. There's a couple things here that we're going to discuss before we move on. We're going to continue to work on the rest of the build, and we're going to come back to a couple things. Number one, I'm still waiting on my servos, so we'll do the servos afterwards. We're going to skip that step. These flaps are just awesome. I love that the way that these things turned out. Our ailerons, our gear laid in there until we put that retract servo in. But a couple tidbits here. Number one, the little bits and pieces, they are right outside the corner of the bay doors. By the diagram, I thought one was up here. We went poking around up there. I just since patched it over with a cover, a nice piece of or a cover white stuff. You'll never even see it. But the little tad bits, the little bits and pieces, they do screw in. And I put a little bit of hot glue underneath them just to prevent them from coming out. But they will spin off if you want them to. It's probably good to take them in and out as you go to transport the wings so you don't break them off. Here's the problem. When you spin them, they're going to hit the screws on those doors. So you may not even want to put those in. Completely your call and up to you. The cover that goes over here needed trimmed up a lot with the stuff, the flash that was on there to make this thing sit flat. The jury's not out yet if I want this on here or not. I'm going to wait and see and finally make a decision. If you do decide to put this on, center it in this area. Go ahead and glue that thing down with either epoxy or canopy glue. And then when you go to drill the holes, simply come in from the other side. Drill your holes through there going out the back. So that way, you know that everything is lined up right. But we'll figure this out later. Maybe yes, maybe no. We'll see. But this to me almost looks cleaner than that cover. So I don't know yet. Also, there is the pitot tube that sits here. This pitot tube came with a cover that is supposed to be cut and goes on over the edge of the wing. I really don't like the way it looks. I think it looks goofy and bulky, but if you can see that, there's the problem. As soon as you start cutting this or flexing it, all the paint pops off the inside. Again, preference thing. I don't like it. I think that looks cleaner, so we just went ahead, and this is a plastic, so this has some flexibility to it. Again, I used hot glue on the inside so I could take it in and out. It's not super permanent. If something should happen, it's an easy fix. And then the last part to discuss with you guys is our covers. Our covers will eventually get either epoxied on, or you can make like a slot system in here with just putting in 2 screws and then 2 screw holes with slots here, so we could actually put those on and slide them back to lock them in place. I don't know if I'm going to do that or epoxy it yet. We'll see. But I'm waiting on a lighting system for this that I can't wait to show you guys and tell you about. And I'm going to be drilling holes and fishing wires through there, so I'm not putting the end caps on. But our wing is complete, and we are going to move on to the fuselage, and we are going to get that started. So I hope the tips and tricks have helped you with this, and will save you some time and effort as we go. Thanks everybody for watching. If you're a current subscriber or new to the channel, I appreciate your time immensely. If you're interested in more balsa ARFs like the Texan 2 or something else in the Warbird or civilian line, I want you guys to head on over to www.Gator-Rc.com and check out their huge selection of balsa ARF airplanes that they carry, from Seagull models, Top RC model, many other manufacturers, your one-stop hobby shop. Otherwise, if you guys liked it, please smash that like button down below. If you didn't like it, make sure you hit that thumbs down button twice for me. As always, like, share, subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell notification and select all so you get made aware of all of my content. We will continue the build series here of the Seagull models Texan 2 from Gator-Rc. We will move forward in the build process, and I'll make sure I share all that content. I hope you guys check it out. Again, it's Brendan from here, just plain crazy. Peace out. Happy flights.